So, to vaping. As part of the crackdown then, plans to make it less appealing include things like restricting fruity flavours, making displays less visible and packaging plain.
Joining us to discuss all this and more, talkTV's chief political commentator, Peter Cardwell, and the broadcaster and political commentator, Matt Stadlen. Let's start with you, Peter. Hi, good morning.
Morning.
This vaping thing, my wife works in a school. She's had to deal with a kid who collapsed from vaping too much. I imagine there will be teachers and parents delighted by this. Is it overreach? Is it a step too far, or is it a good thing?
It's a lot, anyway, in terms of what the government wants to do. It's basically banning almost all disposable vapes, getting them down to 4 or 5 flavours, this plain packaging. There are about 9% of 11 to 15-year-olds who vape that we know about anyway. And as well as that, big restrictions in terms of who actually can buy tobacco. So children born after 2009, for example, will never be able to legally buy tobacco. So it's a big, big change from the government. The only other government that's actually done this is in New Zealand, and they've reversed the decision. So you have people like Liz Truss, for example, coming out saying this is a restriction on people's liberties. People should be able to make their own decisions. I was in a vape shop last week, actually, getting my phone fixed. Often those shops, many people know, will do both phones and vapes. And it was like a sweet shop, very, very brightly coloured, flavours like watermelon, candy floss, things like that. It felt like being in a sweet shop. And that is something that the government wants to curb and stop because there are so many children. You mentioned someone who collapsed there. I spoke to a teacher just a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine, who told me that it wasn't just vapes themselves, but spice, that awful drug, very, very cheap drug, £1 or £2, that was sometimes being put into vapes, children sharing it and being like zombies at the end of it. So there are real public health concerns here, but also concerns about liberty. And I think Rishi Sunak's going to be in trouble in terms of many, not many, but a certain number of Conservative MPs who won't be happy about this restriction on liberty.
The Labour Party are going to be voting for this.
Yes.
I mean, this has been heavily trailed. So today, I think the Prime Minister is going to be at a primary school to sort of really lay out the detail of the announcement. But it is, in its essence, a distinctly unconservative policy, really. It's sort of a more nanny state type policy.
It is nanny state.
We're going to take these freedoms away from you. So some in the party, you mentioned Liz Truss, say this isn't conservative and therefore we want amendments or we won't be voting for it.
Yes, I mean, I think there'll be a few people not voting for it on principle. That's fair enough, essentially, but I think with Labour votes this will go through. I don't think the government is in real trouble necessarily on this, and also it has a lot of public support as well from parents, from teachers, and I mean it'll be a hammer blow to many people who sell these vapes, but they'll find other ways of making money, I'm sure.
Sell more phones, perhaps. Matt, let's bring you in here. The danger here is potentially throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because you want people perhaps to move from smoking to vaping, and that's seen as a good thing. But also, there's the big issue with exactly how you're going to enforce this. If this all goes underground, if you have kids getting vaping on the black market, and God knows, I mean, they could be taking that spice or they could be taking cannabinoid vapes with them as well. There's a real problem here, isn't there?
Well, I think that final point is an interesting one, and we all hope that it doesn't go that way. Politically, I think it's entirely insignificant, this. It's uncontentious. The government says that 70% of respondents to its consultation with the public say that they back this ban effectively. Labour are on side, so I don't think this is going to have any sort of impact on the general election.
But there is an issue, isn't there? When you ban something, you drive it underground. We've seen black market cigarettes being touted around pubs. Are we going to now start seeing kids buying illegal vapes with God knows what
I think that's going to happen.
I'm not so convinced. Don't forget, it is already illegal to sell any sort of vape to an under 18-year-old. So this is about toughening up. As far as Liz Truss's concerns are concerned, I think it's a bit of a nonsense, because this isn't really targeting adults. This is trying to wipe out this trade for children and make kids safer.
I mean, it does affect adults, Matthew, if you effectively ban disposable vapes. Now, a lot of them are taken by children, but adults take them as well.
But they are designed, it seems, I mean, the vaping companies will deny this, to target children with the sorts of flavours and colours and
pineapple,
packaging.
But they are already illegal for children.
They are.
So because the vaping industry says, why not tighten up why not just enforce the laws?
Well, they're getting their hands on them now anyway, even if they're illegal now.
Well,
so that problem already exists.
I think the reason they're toughening up is because whatever is in place legally at the moment moment is not working. So the hope is that this will happen. I suspect that one of the reasons that Rishi Sunak is pushing this through is because he's got young daughters himself. I think more interesting in a way. I suspect so. Yeah, why not? You can be influenced by your personal circumstances if you're Prime Minister.
Policy on anecdote.
You shouldn't, and I've got no evidence to suggest it is.
But I guess what wouldn't be anecdote was the fact that 9% of young teenagers are vaping. And we're going to speak to a head teacher, 11 to 15-year-olds. And we're going to speak to a head teacher later on your wife's example of the impact this is having on the classroom, on their health, the total distraction that we actually, at this point, vaping is this sort of slight experiment we've been running. Long term, we don't know what impact this is going to have on people's hearts, lungs, health at all.
I was going to say my only experience of vaping is that, so I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, proudly, but one of my very, very good friends just couldn't seem to give up smoking, and so for her birthday when she was in her late 30s, I bought her a proper vape, and she did give up smoking. But you're absolutely right, we don't know what the long-term effects are yet.
But the question for the teacher, perhaps later on, is to say, well, actually, hold on a second. If you want to be really tough on this, if you're a school teacher and you see a 15-year-old with a vape, do you call the police? You know, what do you do? How strong action do you actually take on this? How restrictive do you want to be?
Are you a vapor? Are you a disposable
vape?
I'm not. Is this why you're being so strongly about this?
I'm not. I've never had a disposable vape. I've smoked a couple of cigarettes in my life when I was about 20 years old, when I shouldn't have, but I've never been a smoker either.